I think it's now at 7:15. I'm afraid these clocks all say a slightly different time. I'm getting the time on my computer. But good evening, everybody. Good evening, members. Good evening, officers, members of the public, and those joining us on the YouTube channel. And welcome to our Planning Committee meeting this evening, the 5th of March. Move on to the agenda now. The first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. We have two apologies this evening from Councillor Bowers-Flint, who is being substituted by Councillor Wrench, and from Councillor Finken, who hasn't got a substitute. Councillor Hayes is due to be joining us, but apparently stuck in traffic at the moment. So we will ask him for his declaration of interest when he arrives. The next item on the agenda is item 2, declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest relating to items on the agenda? That is a no. Thank you, members. Now move on to item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. The minutes of the previous meeting on the 13th February have been circulated. Do you wish to for me to sign those as
Moved, Madam Chairman, for the true reflection.
Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Monday. Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you, members. The next item on the agenda is item 4, public question time. We don't have any registered speakers on this item, so we'll now move on to planning applications, item 5 on the agenda. The first application this evening is application number 21/037484, which is land west of the former oil depot on Headingham Road in Gosfield. We have one speaker this evening, who is the agent, Mr. Elvin, who I think is joining us remotely.
Hello, Mr. Elvin. Would you like to join the meeting now, please?
Good evening.
Thank you.
Good evening. Far away, Mr. Elvin.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to make the representation to you today, and I provide this statement on behalf of the applicants. So applicants are encouraged to engage with the local authority at the pre-application stage to identify any issues and enable all parties to move forward with confidence. That is exactly what occurred here, with the pre-application advice confirming, and I quote, "This proposal would be supported by officers for the following reasons. The principle of the proposed development is acceptable. Suitably designed buildings could be achieved on the site. The layout of the proposal is considered to be acceptable. There would be no detrimental impact upon any neighbouring residential properties. Sufficient car parking can be provided, and there are no unacceptable landscape or ecology impacts." That advice is clear and unequivocal that this proposal would be supported, and the applicants thereby made the application based on that advice. They have supplemented the application with additional reports required to deal with the consultee comments relating to ecology and drainage in particular, and have redesigned the layout of the proposal to satisfy other comments made by the council also. In November, the applicants were sent a list of conditions to agree prior to a decision being issued. There was no suggestion the proposal was unacceptable in principle, and indeed that was only presented to the applicants in December last year, some 2 years after the application had been submitted. Your officer has provided a comprehensive report supporting the recommendation to refuse permission. However, there are clear reasons why that is not the correct decision. Firstly, this is a site that has hosted a range of previous commercial uses and was last occupied by a skip hire company. We are fairly certain that use was also not beautiful, but it was allowed to occur here nonetheless. Secondly, this is a brownfield site where the proposal is to reuse the land in a manner which attracts over 40 jobs into the Braintree district, yet alone the investment in the infrastructure and the construction itself, including the ecological and drainage enhancements proposed. Thirdly, there has also never been any suggestion of harm to the amenity of adjacent property, and yet we are now told we are being afforded no opportunity to make further submissions in that regard. Fourthly, we've also not failed to complete the Section 106 agreement, providing solicitor details as soon as they were required, but again being afforded no opportunity to complete it. And finally, the applicants can readily deliver cycle parking, but have not been asked to. Ultimately, therefore, your officers have completely changed direction on this application after 2 years and positive discussions, and now recommend you refuse the application. All the applicant asks is that you consider the proposal in the context of significant job creation it brings, the comprehensive manner in which it makes use of this commercial site, and with the same positive view the previous planning officer had of the proposal. There are extensive benefits here, and little to be gained from refusing the application, and we thereby ask that you please overturn the officer's recommendation and support the sustainable reuse of this brownfield site. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elvin. We'll now move on to the presentation, which is going to be given by Lisa.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good evening, members. This is a full planning application for the erection of a storage building and office building, together with external ladder rack, vehicle washing bay, parking for 44 vehicles and 10 lorries, associated hard standing, sustainable urban drainage system and 2.4 metre high boundary fence to facilitate the use of the land by a scaffolding company. The address is land west of the former oil depot on Headingham Road in Gosfield. An aerial location plan here which shows the site in relation to Gosfield. So the application site is this large star. You can see it's located to the north of Gosfield along Headingham Road. In terms of the location plan here, the site is edged in red. The eastern boundary has a frontage with Headingham Road, and the southern boundary is formed by planting, and indeed, as can be seen here in the aerial photo, the southern parcel of the site is heavily planted. The western boundary here is open, beyond which is a public right-of-way, so that's this track that runs in a north-south direction, and you'll see that later in some of the photographs. To the north, there's some further planting and an informal road and a residential dwelling, so here. Turning to the proposed site plan, the application is seeking full permission for 2 buildings, so an office building where my cursor is, which is orientated to front onto the roadside, and a storage building that sits behind it. And as we know, the use of the land is to facilitate scaffolding use. The application also includes some external ladder racking, so that's where my cursor is here, towards that western boundary. This is an area of 19 by 20 metres, and the height would be to a maximum of 6 metres. Also along this western boundary is an area designated as a washing bay. This would measure 35 by 19 metres and is understood to be a continuation of hard standing for washing of vehicles. An area here where my cursor is where the sustainable urban drainage system would be. And apart from some small areas of soft planting, which is shown green on the plan, and this retained tree belt along Headingham Road, the rest of the site would be hard standing. Accommodated within that hard standing is parking provision along this northern boundary for 10 lorries, and then otherwise across the site parking for 44 vehicles. A new boundary treatment is proposed along this western rear boundary, and that's a 2.4 metre high fence. Access for the development would remain from Headingham Road. Looking at the proposed elevations now, you can see the 2 buildings here. So they are joined by this single-storey link. So you've got the office building, which would front onto Headingham Road here, so 2-storey in scale, the single-storey link, and then you've got this 2-storey storage building that sits behind it. As you can see in these elevations, both of the buildings would be constructed in a light grey wall panel cladding with a grey roof panelling. Excuse me. Looking at the ground and first floor plans, the storage building at the rear would be divided into 2 sections. So one section contains 2 floors of office accommodation and the open plan storage. And then you've got this single-storey link to provide access to the 2-storey office accommodation. Here is a tree protection plan, so it's taken from the ARB report, but the site plan is slightly out of date. It hasn't been updated. However, the ARB report does set out the removal of one group of trees and 4 individual trees. So 2 of the trees are category A. These are located along this sort of western boundary, so where my cursor is here, and this one here. These are proposed to be removed to facilitate the development. No justification has been given for the removal of any trees at the site, and no replacement or mitigation planting is being proposed. In terms of some site photographs here, this is a view taken from the site entrance in 2022, so it's looking towards that western rear boundary, and you can see the extent of hard standing there. Another view taken from 2022, standing in the site entrance looking to the northern boundary, you can see the existing building and again hard standing. And then some photographs taken in January this year, so this is standing very much in the site entrance, so the trees here you can see are that retained tree belt along Headingham Road. You can see the existing building just sort of behind the scaffolding that's been erected here, and just some sort of external storage associated with the scaffolding use that's taken place on the site. Further photo from January this year, so standing more central within the site now, looking back towards the access, so where that car is coming in is the access from Headingham Road, the retained tree belt, and you can just see sort of the sort of materials and external storage that's occurring on site currently. This is a photo taken from that public right-of-way that's to the rear western boundary, so you can see it's very open in nature, no formal boundary treatment there, and you can see the extent of that external storage that's occurring currently. And again, just another photograph taken from that public right-of-way to show the extent and the impact of external storage. Here's a photograph taken in that northwestern corner, so the external storage is already occurring, and this is one of the trees, the category A trees, that is due to be removed, so that's T10 in that northwestern corner. Just wanted to pause the sections here to pick up a quick response to the agent's comments in the question time. So there was a pre-application at the site for scaffolding use, to which officers were generally quite supportive of. However, that was issued within a different policy context and at a time when the local plan included a policy for consideration of commercial development outside of the settlement boundaries. The new local plan does not include such a policy provision, and thus there is now a change in circumstances for the principle of development. I've included this slide here just to sort of give a flavour in terms of consistency of the authority determining such applications. So here shows in the red edge a location just to the northwest of our application site with the star. So this is land adjacent to, or land within Gosfield Airfield. So this was a planning application for the construction of a proposed assembly and leisure facility. And you can see here on the site plan, it includes really one main building. So that building was 32 by 42 metres. So not dissimilar in terms of scale of what's being proposed on this application site. On that appeal, the inspector concluded that the development would conflict with a policy that seeks to restrict development within the town and village boundaries, and that there would be further harm to landscape distinctiveness, and the appeal was dismissed on those 2 grounds. So officers have been mindful in terms of that appeal decision when considering this planning application. So that's more sort of just a point of interest. In terms of the summary conclusion, the site is outside of the development boundary. There's no policy support within the local plan for new buildings to support commercial businesses in the countryside, and the development is contrary to the development plan. Officers consider that the buildings and the general site layout is not well designed or sensitive to its surroundings. The development would appear unduly prominent from public viewpoints, especially along the public right-of-way to the rear of the site, and it would be harmful to the wider character and appearance of this countryside location. There's no material considerations that would indicate that planning permission be determined not in accordance with the development plan. As we have seen, the proposal seeks the removal of 2 category A trees of amenity value, and their loss would be harmful to the character and appearance of the area. Insufficient replacement planting for the loss of the trees has not been given. There would also be unacceptable impact on the amenity of the neighbouring property at Orange Hall to the north. The application provides an over-provision of vehicle parking and no cycle storage provision, and this would be contrary to policies which seek to promote sustainable modes of transport. Officers have considered the economic and social benefits that would be accrued. However, there are significant environmental impacts, and overall the development would not fall to be sustainable development. And lastly, there is no mechanism in place to secure the open space contribution required to mitigate the impacts of the development. And our recommendation this evening is that Planning Permission be refused. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Members, I'll pass it over to you now. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Beavis.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm more than happy to kick off. And I suppose if I do need to declare anything, I spent most of my childhood and early years in Gosfield, so I do know the village quite well. I'm just a little bit confused. I wouldn't just mind a bit of clarity around where you said about the public right of way, and you put some visuals up as well. I'm not aware of that. Are you talking about the entrance to Orange Hall up on the airfield? I can't visualise where that is. I wouldn't just mind a bit more clarity on that, please. It's one of the photographs on your presentation.
Yeah, let me just get that up and I'll share it again. 1 moment.
Lovely, thank you. It's just you referred to it as a public right of way, and I just wanted some. I'm not aware there is a public right of way. Just seeking some clarity. Thank you.
Yeah, this access track here, it's unfortunate I can't zoom out, but I can go on Google Maps if that would be helpful. So this wide track is a public right of way, so it runs very much in a north-south direction. So yes, there is a track that runs sort of informally between the development site and Orange Hall, but that's not a formal public right of way. But this north-south track is a public right of way. So when I did walk it, there was a number of people walking along it with their dogs, so it's obviously well used.
Right, that's helpful. I can visualise it better now in terms of the airfield, which I know quite well. So thank you for that. I mean, I think my sort of gut feeling on this is it irritates me that we have to turn down a planning application that supports economic growth in the district, particularly the rural areas, and that would be my starting point. That I do recognise that it sits outside of the parish boundary. I suppose what I'm finding quite hard to understand is how it's actually got to this, because it seemed to me that in the presentation they were saying that actually there was some sort of early day support from officers, to the point where it looks to me like the company's sort of moved on and is operating on the site. So are we actually talking about enforcement here as well? We didn't actually mention that in the presentation, but I just felt there was a bit more clarity needed for me to have further thoughts, really. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Yeah, so as I sort of outlined in my response to the public question time, there was initial pre-application discussion on it, which officers were supportive of, but that, as I explained, was in a different policy context where the local plan supported commercial development outside of the settlement boundaries, wherein the new local plan policy doesn't. I think when the application first came in, it was a different officer, and I think perhaps officers were going along the line of some support for it. But I think once we've reviewed it internally, we've sort of taken a different conclusion ultimately. So that is the position.
I think also just we're not really here to discuss any enforcement issues either. So if we just keep those separate. Sorry.
Just come back on that point.
Yeah, please, Lisa.
Sorry, I forgot to pick that point up. Yeah, so in terms of enforcement, we are, as a council, looking to take some enforcement action against it. So, thank you.
I think we're obviously the activities taking place on the site. We're aware of that. Currently, it doesn't benefit from planning permission at the moment. We haven't taken any action so far, obviously, because the application's in and it needs to be determined. Obviously, that's it. So depending on the outcome of tonight, we'll obviously have to review what the position is. It's potential, but so, yeah, we haven't done anything yet, pending the decision tonight. Thank you.
Any other members? Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. Like Councillor Beavis, I generally would support appropriate uses that provide employment in rural areas, but I think this one does tip over the line in terms of scale. And I think it hasn't attempted to do some of the things we'd like to see, like retention of the trees. I agree with officers that why couldn't a little bit of space be made to keep those 2 Category A trees? But we have, I think, overall, the stronger policy steer from the new local plan. And as I've raised at this committee and in other forums before, these rural sites, sometimes farmyards, sometimes old bits of hard standing, can become quite intensive commercial uses with HGVs coming in and out. And I am cognizant of the fact there is a residential building quite close, and with the scaffolding building, as the Environmental Health Officer said, it's very likely to be creating noise, metal on metal noise, basically. So, whilst I think there is a strong argument, as the agent said, about employment, I think this does go over that line of being too much in the countryside, and with all the harms that have been identified. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think I agree with the previous 2 councillors with regards to the need to have employment in rural areas. Certainly, it's of huge benefit. It needs to be in the right place, and I think there needs to be a degree of responsibility and sensitivity when developing a site like this. I think where we've had the benefit of our planning team is that amongst the team they've obviously had the chance to discuss and reflect on how it was first decided on, and then using the new policy under the local plan, they've come to the right conclusion on this one. And I think what's been asked for here is an overdevelopment of the site. It doesn't quite fit with that location. However, it is a brownfield site, and it would be good to see something happening there at some point, without a doubt. But I think in this instance, as previous members of this committee have mentioned, it's just the wrong side of that balance, I feel. So I'm minded to go along with officers' recommendations this evening. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Schwer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Agree with most of the comments that have been mentioned so far this evening, and I think what's really difficult actually is between a bit of a rock and a hard place is the fact that it is a brownfield site. It is offering employment, and I kind of wonder at the back of my mind actually, what is going to be suitable for this brownfield site that's got access and everything else. If the applicant had perhaps come forward in a pre-application and perhaps subsequent conversations with planners, I think especially from the public right of way, perhaps there was some additional screening there, and perhaps a workaround, perhaps with the biodiversity with the trees and one tree, and to mitigate that, it would have been a possibility. So overall, I'm really disappointed with the officer's recommendation, because I do believe that with the what we have before us with a brownfield site, the offer in rural employment is important, and we are actually talking about sustainability here. We're actually talking about people who could actually walk from Gosfield or bike from Gosfield here to this, so it is providing local sustainable employment. So overall, there's a lot to like about this, and I am disappointed that this recommendation has come before the committee.
Yes, I think the difference here, as explained by Lisa, is the policy change. So it is unfortunate that applications or discussions took place, and then the policy has changed. And I do think the problem is we haven't got a clear policy provision for this. Councillor Spring.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of the points I was going to raise, actually, Councillor Beavis mentioned and have been answered. I was going to just ask for some clarification around the status of the storage on the site, but we've had that explained. Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's a brownfield site. It would provide quite a bit of employment, so it is a pity that I think this is not, it's not quite right. If I could just ask for something from Lisa. We've got 5 reasons for refusal. the last one, the Section 106 agreement, the agent said that they were, they'd provided solicitors' details, but they weren't given an opportunity to complete that. I mean, I am assuming that in line with the normal planning process that there was a chance for them to do that, but could I just have an explanation? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sprout. I'll try and help with that. So in terms of the 106, as I understand it, the applicant did provide solicitors' details when they were requested. When the officer who was dealing with it previously was looking to recommend approval of the application. When it became apparent that we weren't going to be able to support as an officer group, we didn't progress the 106 because obviously doing that incurs legal costs for both the applicant and us. So I think, as Lisa explained in the presentation, or is explained in the report, that it's not that we're saying the applicant was unwilling to enter into a 106, but if we're recommending refusal of the application because there isn't a 106 that's been agreed and signed, we need to have the reason there, so that if they do appeal, then it's covered it would need to be addressed as part of the appeal. If we didn't, the risk is they could say it wasn't cited as a grounds for refusal, and then we would have trouble at an appeal dealing with it. So it's us trying not to waste money, either public money or the applicant's money, in progressing a legal agreement when we're not supporting the application. But it certainly could be overcome, and as Mr Elvin said at question time, it's not that the applicant's unwilling to enter into it. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Thanks, Neil. Yes, I understand. That's fine. I mean, notwithstanding that, we do have 4 other reasons for refusal. I mean, I would like to think that with some, well, I was going to say with some changes to it, it could be made, another application could be made acceptable, but of course it is against policy now as it stands. So I'm happy to agree officer's recommendation for refusal this evening. I would like to think that either this applicant or another applicant could come forward with something for this site. I think we would all like to see something happening on there, particularly if it, provides local employment. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the explanation of why things have reached this point is a fairly simple one, and that is with the ever-increasing importance of issues such as sustainability in our thinking and policy development, which is always going on in reality. This application has, in the determination process, fallen across the replacement with policies that were developed where sustainability was not set so high as a priority. And that explains why the policy position has changed, and therefore why the recommendation must be different now. I feel that that is unavoidable, and that this proposal is now contrary to our local development plan. However, one of the things I would point out is that this district and its rural areas would very much benefit from the presence of this company operating within the district, and there are more sustainable sites available, as I understand it, within the district, within a reasonable distance of here, that are more sustainable, and therefore it seems to me that the problem is this is a development in the wider sense that we welcome, bringing what was described as potentially 40 jobs to a rural area. It's just that in keeping with modern policy imperatives, this is not the right place. And so very sadly, I too join my colleagues in feeling that I'm in a position where I'm obliged to support officer recommendation. Thank you.
Neil's just going to come back as well.
So just to draw members' attention, so I know it'll have been read when you're reading the report, but I think paragraph 10.3 of the officer's report, I think just summarises the position, the policy position, and references LPP7. So whilst we're obviously as an officer group, we're hearing what members are saying about wanting to see the site being redeveloped and something happening on there, I think as officers, we're obviously mindful that any proposals for the site need to be assessed against the policy, which, as Lisa explained in the presentation, is is less supportive of commercial development within rural areas. So I'm not saying none, but there are particular considerations and discussion within that policy around the scale of commercial development. So just emphasising the point that's made in the report that we're assessing the application against that policy context, and whilst as planners we want to see brownfield sites redeveloped and brought forward rather than greenfield sites being used, that has to be looking at the development plan as a whole. So just whilst we absolutely note what's been said from various members about wanting to see something happen with the site, any proposals that we're assessing would need to be assessed against that policy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. I think at some point we need to possibly look again at the policies in the rural areas and see if they're continue to be appropriate, but that's obviously not the something we're doing this evening. Does any other member wish to comment on this application? If not, would any member like to move officer's recommendation to refuse the application? Thank you, Councillor Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'll move recommendation for refusal. Thank you.
And does that find a seconder? Councillor Holland. Okay, so it has been moved by Councillor Spray, seconded by Councillor Holland, that we refuse this application. All those in favour of refusal? All those against? And abstentions? That application has been refused. The next application this evening is application number 22/031344. That's Deals of Kelvedon, Station Road, Kelvedon. This application can be found on page 32 of the agenda. We don't have any speakers on this, so we will move to Lisa's presentation. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. This is a full application for the demolition of the existing buildings and provision of a mixed-use development comprising 24 residential apartments with a ground floor retail unit in Block A and ground floor commercial within Blocks B and C, associated access, parking and landscaping. And it's at Deals of Kelvedon, Station Road in Kelvedon. As set out in the committee report, an appeal has been lodged against the non-determination of the application, and officers are seeking to outline the LPA's position in the forthcoming appeal by setting out its putative reasons for refusal. Here's the location plan with the site edged in red. It's within the defined development boundary for Kelvedon and is allocated employment policy area within the local plan. The northwest of the site fronts onto Station Approach, which provides access to the railway station, and to the east of the site there are two-storey residential dwellings in Rosalind Terrace. There's a change in the site topography with the land rising from Station Road to the rear of the site with a difference of approximately 3.5 metres, which you can see in some of the later photos and sections. Aerial photo now, so just showing the existing situation. So you can see the existing buildings which front onto Station Road. Comprises of a car, sales and repair garage, and associated parking at the rear, and garage buildings. Some existing elevations here show they show the scale of the existing buildings to be demolished. So generally single storey with an element of two-storey here. Again, you'll see them in the photos. So this is probably a little bit more helpful in setting the scene. So you can see the two-storey residential properties of Rosalind Terrace in this left-hand side of this photograph, and then looking up Station Road. So you can see this sort of single-storey open nature here and the element of two-storey. And again, just looking at it from the other way, so Station Approach sort of rising on the right-hand side here, and the existing buildings here. Again, another view of it from Station Road, and then this is this bottom photo is Rosalind Terrace on the left-hand side, and that access track. You can see this open use to the side. And lastly, just views that show Station Approach. So you can see the side of the development and the open nature of the storage here and how the land rises. And again, just standing slightly further up Station Approach, looking back, so the garages, that open parking, and then the existing buildings which are to be demolished. Turning to the proposed site plan, following the demolition of all the buildings on site, the application proposes 3 blocks, So Block A, Block B and Block C, as you can see. These will all be a mix of residential and commercial use, as you'll see on the floor plan shortly. New access would be created from Station Road, so here, and that provides access to all the different parking areas. This access, existing access along Rosalind Terrace will be retained and utilised for residential parking here for Block C. You can see within the centre of the site, so between Block A and B, an area of green space, so this would be shared for all the residential units, and around it you've got a number of cycle and bin storage provision. So looking at the buildings themselves, this is Block A, a 3-storey buildings proposed with 8 residential flats, so that will contain 4 one-bed units and two 2-bed units, and approximately 110 square metres of commercial floor space on the ground floor. So here is Block A. What's probably not quite clear on here, but you might see on the floor plan shortly, it does have an area of undercroft parking. So these spaces here where my cursor is hovering, you'll see shortly, is some undercroft parking. So again, here is the floor plan. So here's the undercroft parking that provides access at the ground floor here to the commercial unit, and then provides through the undercroft parking for the first and second floor flats. Block B here is one of the units here on the location plan that fronts onto Station Road. So again, another 3-storey building proposed with 12 units, residential units here, 8 one-bed units and 4 2-bed units. And on the ground floor is an area of general purpose commercial space equating to 300 square metres. Again, if we look at that on the floor plans, you can see the commercial use there, and then the access for the residential at first and second floor, flat roof in terms of design. Block C is the last unit here. So again, another unit fronting onto Station Road. It's more of a 2-storey scale. So it has 2 one-bed flats and 2 2-bed flats on the first floor, each with this frontage balcony. And on the ground floor is a retail area of 423 square metres. Again, you can see that here. Just some street scenes here to show how the buildings sit within the wider context. On the left-hand side of this top top plan, you've got the existing 2-storey Rosalind Terrace dwellings, and then these 2 units, B and C, that front onto Station Road. And you can see how that relates to the existing railway line. And then the bottom image is a section taken from Station Road, so you can see that the change in the land level. You've got building B, which fronts onto Station Road, and blocks A that sits behind it. And some perspective views here that have been provided to show how the building sits. So again, this is sort of looking back onto the buildings from Station Road, so these 2 buildings with the one behind it. Again, this is looking up on the right-hand side, Station Approach, and left would be Station Road, again to show how the buildings sit within that context. And again now, looking to the rear of the unit, so building A here, which has got that undercroft parking where my cursor is, and the associated parking and the amenity space in between the 2 blocks. There has been a member update circulated. This sets out the office's intent to add a further putative reason for refusal relating to the application failing to pass a sequential test in regards to flood risk. Secondly, we've had a full response now from the Council's viability expert, which concludes that the applicant has a surplus which should be available towards meeting the full Section 106 requirements. And lastly, Natural England have confirmed no objections to the application, subject to the Council securing a financial contribution towards ecological mitigation. So in terms of a summary and recommendation, the proposals would fail to preserve or enhance the setting of the Kelvedon Conservation Area, resulting in a low level of less than substantial harm. Further harm is caused by the poor layout and design of the proposal, the poor internal and external amenity for future occupiers, poor impact to neighbouring occupiers, insufficient parking spaces, the failure to pass a sequential test, and insufficient financial contributions in lieu of the on-site affordable housing, and a wider lack of securing the Section 106 contributions required. And therefore, officers have concluded that the public benefits would not outweigh the harm indicated, and it's recommended that had the local planning authority been in a position to determine the application, that planning permission would have been refused. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Members? Who would like? Councillor Schwer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd just like to ask a question, please, because I noticed you mentioned in the last point in the summary there about insufficient parking spaces, but this is a planning application right beside a railway station, and we're talking about sustainable travel and sustainable modes, so the two conflict. So surely those that, if those houses are right, or those properties potentially would have been there, I see two policies fighting each other here, where with regards to sort of sustainability and everything else. But that was just my comment. I just wondered if you have a reason for potentially allowing not so many parking spaces at that point on an application like this.
Yeah, so the parking policy, the parking standards that we apply, minimum standards for residential dwellings, there's within the existing standards, there's a minimum number of spaces per dwelling. It doesn't allow, or it doesn't encourage flexibility according to the sustainability of the location. I would accept that obviously being next to the railway station, it offers the opportunity for people to use the train to get to work maybe and leisure activities and whatever. However, sort of looking at Kelvedon overall, whilst there are some facilities and it's a key service village in terms of the hierarchy, we would think it was unlikely that residents would be able to fulfil all their needs either by train travel or from within the village. So there is still likely to be a reliance on the private car, and there is a need we would say, to provide parking. Obviously, because it is close to a station, there are various parking restrictions on the surrounding streets. So, whereas perhaps in other locations in towns and villages, you might be able to rely on a degree of on-the-street car parking, because of the parking restrictions around the station, that wouldn't be available. And I think our concern is if there isn't sufficient parking for residents of the development in the future, then that's likely to exacerbate existing problems on surrounding streets. So that's why we've taken the view that, notwithstanding the fact it's next to the station, it should still be complying with the parking standards, Councillor Schwer. So I think that's the officer view in terms of that and our assessment of it.
The other members wish to comment on this application. Thank you, Councillor Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. I was going to say I hardly know what to say really, but I do, because we've got 5 potential reasons for refusal within the report, but I actually think there are 6 now because the flood sequential test has been added. But for me, what stood out when I looked at this earlier was the design. For me, really, really disappointing and really poor design of these blocks. Doesn't inspire me in any way at all, and doesn't fit in with what is currently in the village. It's just poor, and I honestly don't know what else to say about it, Chairman, other than that. There are a number of other perfectly sound reasons put forward by the officers for refusing it. The affordable housing being one, in that it's what is proposed is unsuitable. And the whole layout as a whole, with one block sitting behind the other 2, the access to them isn't what we like to see. I'm sorry, it's just really, really disappointing, and I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Spray. Any other members wish to? I appreciate this has already gone to appeal, so Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, yes, I was going to venture into that territory and note that it is another non-determination that's gone to appeal. I know there's probably lots of reasons for that, but it is a concern. It's another difficult one because it's a brownfield site, so the principle of redevelopment in terms of sustainability is good, and as members have said, it's next to the railway station. However, knowing that area very well, I think it's the massing of those units in particular. I think it's Unit C is the really big one. I mean, if you compare that to the terrace of cottages that runs up towards the centre of the village, it's a really stark contrast. And I wonder about the living conditions there, especially so near to the railway line. Well, we've had other blocks of flats close to railway lines. That's been an issue in terms of noise. I know we haven't got a highways objection. I'm not going to argue we should, but knowing that area, that is already a very tight area for traffic, and this will generate some traffic next to the railway station. The junction with the main road that runs through the village is often backed up, and the sight lines are not very good round there. So I just think that's a sort of another thing in the mix. But it's a difficult one. I mean, I noted going through the report, you've got Kelvedon Parish Council support it, or don't object to it, whereas Fearing do object to it. You've got a different interpretation between what the local plan says, which actually is not housing on this site, which I think is important in terms of policy, whereas the neighbourhood plan says something different, and then there's an argument in the report, something about which came first, and they were decided on the same night in 2022, I think it was. It was very complicated. And then we've got the argument about the adjacent to the conservation area, and I think that's where the massing of this Unit C comes in, that it's quite a big building. It's not in the conservation area, but it's very close to it. So a bit like the last one, it's a shame really, because it is a brownfield site and we'd want to see something happen there, and this one it doesn't conflict with the countryside use. But I think for me, it is the massing of those buildings, the layout and the design, which is the big one, allied to the fact this site is not allocated for housing in the local plan. Thank you.
Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Councillor Abbott has just pointed up what for me looks to be a very important issue, which is to do with the aesthetics of this in the context of the wider settlement. Setting aside my reservations about whether buildings such as this in close proximity to the railway station in 20 years' time will be considered attractive places to live, what worries me in part at this time is that setting it is in the setting of the conservation area, and immediately proximal to it. One of the things that will be true about this building is people inside it looking out will have the benefit of attractive village surroundings and when they come to and from it. So that's a benefit which adds value to these properties, but at the same time, the existence of buildings like this directly adjacent to what have already rightly been described as attractive cottages is actually to the detriment of everybody else. And surely that is one of the issues which actually underlies the planning system, that we look at. We're looking at the interest of the developer and balancing against the wider interest of wider society. And I think in this case, you've got a classic example of one where this, if built like this, will be detrimental to everybody else, irrespective of how beneficial it is to the people who might live there. Much better could be done, and I think that our decision should reflect the fact that we should rightly demand better of the architecture and more acceptable dwelling places for people who need smaller spaces, but perhaps not as small as some of these. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor and Councillor Scrett.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I forgot to say something, and Councillor Abbott's comment about this already having gone to appeal reminded me that it's evident in the report that officers did try very hard to work with the applicant to resolve particularly the design issues, including also putting them in touch with county highways so that holding objection from Highways could be resolved. So I think it was not for want of effort on the part of our officers, and then, you know, sort of right at the last minute, the applicant went for non-determination. And I do think it's a pity when that happens, but it does happen that sometimes applicants get, well, they get more than a hint that something is not going to be acceptable, and they jump to appeal before it's had a chance to come to us first, which is which is a pity. But it's clear that officers did try very hard to resolve some of these issues. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Spray was going to make the same point, deciding to bypass the committee and go straight to appeal. The only other comment thank you for your comments. The only other comment I wanted to make is that it isn't actually allocated as an employment site, and so I think we have to be careful when we're talking about brownfield sites. These sites are allocated for employment for a reason, to create employment within a settlement. So I don't think anybody's got any further comments to make. Would anybody like to? Councillor Abbott?
Move refusal with officer recommendation.
Move refusal of officer's recommendation to refuse application, and seconded by Councillor Holland. So, as the recommendation, if we had had power to determine this application, Councillor Abbott is moving that we would have refused the application, and Councillor Holland has seconded that. All those in favour of refusal if we'd had power? That is unanimous. Thank you, members. So we'll now move on to the next application this evening, which is application, well, it's 5C on the agenda, and the application number is 23/00651 out, which is at the Mall, London Road, Braintree. This, members, is on page 90 of your report, and we don't have any speakers on this application, so we shall move straight to the presentation, which is going to be given by Janine. Janine?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This application seeks outline planning application for 9 residential units. In terms of its location, the application site is located within the defined development boundary of Great Notley and has good access to public transport. To the north, east and south of the site is the strategic allocation of the 1,750 new homes of Notley set out in LPP 17 of the adopted local plan. At this stage, only access is sought. Appearance, landscape and layout and scale are reserved for future consideration. An indicative site plan has been provided to illustrate how 9 dwellings would be laid out on the site. The application fails to demonstrate that the site can accommodate the 9 dwellings and satisfy the design, layout and amenity standards, resulting in a contrived layout which would be out of keeping with the urban grain of the area. The dwelling mix of 9, 4 and 5 bedroom homes does not meet the identified housing need of the area, and the layout illustrates the proposal would have a significant pressure on existing preserved trees subject to a TPO to be removed or reduced given the extent of shading they will cause to the rear gardens and impact on residential amenity. In addition, the replanting of small street trees on site and beyond the site is not achievable. The proposal would result in the loss of 8 oak trees and 2 willow category C trees and 1 oak category U. However, the remainder of the trees to the north and southeast corner of the site and this category A oak tree would be preserved, as I said, by a TPO that was granted last year. Officers are of the view that the red line site area has been artificially engineered to fall below the 0.5 hectares threshold for providing affordable housing and other planning obligations, and no valid planning reasoning has been given to why the areas shown in the blue, particularly to this northern strip or this southeast corner, as they are annotated as ecological enhancement areas, could not be contained within the red line, and the proposed red line site area excludes all of the trees shown to be retained as part of the TPO. However, the applicant is utilising the northern strip and the southeast corner in providing benefits to the scheme, suggesting that obviously the retention of the TPO helps this development on the site. In terms of the photos, this is the northern boundary of the trees, which would be contained within the northern strip, which would not be able to have access. Again, the northeast corner. This is to the southwest of the site. The existing willow trees, the southern boundary, the view to the southeastern corner. This is where the southeastern ecological enhancement area is proposed. Again, looking to the southeast of the site, the existing annex on site, the eastern boundary, and beyond this obviously is where the strategic growth area would be located. Again, the northeastern boundary, and then looking towards the west, obviously looking towards London Road. Again, to the east of the site and the northeast corner. In terms of summarising the application, as I said, it's for 9 dwellings with all matters reserved except for access. The benefits of the site include the location within a settlement boundary. It's a sustainable location with access to public transport, and it would deliver 9 dwellings, and obviously the economic benefits during the construction of development and thereafter. However, the adverse impacts of the site is that the site area has been engineered below the threshold for a major development. There is harm to the trees. Future occupiers' amenity would be compromised due to the extent of shading from the trees. The layout and quantum of development is at odds with the surrounding development. The proposal fails to provide an adequate and appropriate dwelling mix, and the lack of planning obligations secured by a Section 106 agreement. Members are therefore recommended to refuse outline planning permission.
Thank you, Janine. Members who'd like to kick off. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This application falls in the ward that I am one of 3 councillors representing. It's a bit of a shame, this one, because I think we have a proud and a reputation for recognising when there's a trigger for affordable housing, and when we are proud to deliver that affordable housing. It's always a bit of a shame when something like this comes to planning committee and there's what appears to be a clear and obvious dereliction of duty to provide that affordable housing by way of presenting it in a way that relieves them of that duty, which I think is a real shame. But I also think in doing so, they're almost kind of shot themselves in the foot by undersizing the rest of the development that they're trying to propose this evening too. So for me, it's either stand up for your duty and provide that affordable housing, or reduce the size of the development that you're trying to propose for us to consider this evening. I think there's plenty of recommendations that would allow us to side with officers' recommendations to refuse this evening. The fact that there's going to be harm to trees, and the fact that there's going to be amenity compromised for any future occupants by the shading from the trees, and the fact that there's a lack of planning obligations set out for a Section 106 agreement as well. That's just my views on this application this evening. I shall wait and see what other members say. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Any other members wish to comment on this application? Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Looking at the drawings that have been provided to us, and we've just seen in the officer's report, I'm sure everybody in the room can see that this is crammed in order to deliver these 9 houses. If we consented something like this, they would be hugely compromised in terms of amenity, and that says to me that this is an attempt to simply put too many houses on the site. But there's another issue which is not raised by the officers, and rightly, because it's not really our responsibility, it's Highways Access. But I have to say that there's something strange if one looks at the drawing, when you end up with the driveway that comes up from the road, the mall. Once it gets into this plot, all of a sudden the road gets wider, which tells me by implication that they recognise that the mall is really too narrow for this number of dwellings. And so, in many respects, this is a highly contrived proposal that's before us. It doesn't reflect good design, nor indeed is it the density of housing that is appropriate to this place and this area, looking at the rest of the dwellings around and about it. So I find myself in a position where, for once, I am utterly clear about this. I support officer recommendation. This is a very poor proposal. Thank you.
Councillor Abbott, I believe.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I won't repeat the point on the affordable housing, but I agree with it. Yes, for me, it's two issues as well as that. One is the density. If you look at the density of houses in that area, this is far, far higher. It really is trying to cram probably double what you could reasonably get on that site. Very attractive site as it is now, but also, my hobby horse, tree losses, and in this case, we're talking about 9 oak trees and others, and the point that officers make that inevitably, if that was built, the trees that survive would come under pressure. We had so many TPO applications where residents have complained about big trees overshadowing their property, things falling off them, being almost completely surrounded, at least on two sides, by substantial trees. That's inevitably going to become an issue in the future. So I think we're talking about future compromise as well as current losses. So very clear one for me, this one, Madam Chairman, in terms of refusing it.
Any other members? Councillor Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. I absolutely agree with everything that's been said. It's not just the artificially engineered side line, the lack of affordable homes because they've chosen to go for a smaller site, the completely unnecessary loss of trees and so on. It's the fact that even then, with the 9 homes they are proposing, they're 4 and 5 bedroom. It's not even an acceptable mix for us. So there's been no attempt to try and produce something, that would at least offer some smaller homes. There's an awful lot wrong with it, and deliberately wrong with it, which it's taking the mickey a bit, really. In a very non-planning expression, but it is. So I'm very happy to move officers' recommendation for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Would anybody like to second that? Councillor Diamond. Sorry, I was looking the wrong direction, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Diamond's going to second that. So it has been moved by Councillor Spray that we refuse this application, seconded by Councillor Diamond. All those in favour of refusal? That again is unanimous. Thank you, members. We'll now move on to our next application, which is item 5D on the agenda. It's application number 23/02235, section 106A. PLC Hunnick Limited, Kings Road, Halstead. And Neil, we don't have any speakers on this, and the presentation is going to be given by Neil. And that is on page 124 of the agenda, members.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. So this application seeks permission to vary the terms of the 106 agreement, which was agreed when the outline permission was granted for the development of the site. This is a development of a previous commercial use site, the Hunwick site in Kings Road, Halstead. So this is the red line site that we're dealing with. There was some land in blue next to it, members will remember, also being redeveloped, but formed part of a different permission. So this is the consented scheme. So you can see Kings Road at the bottom here, Factory Lane West at the top here. So the area in question, or the dwellings in question, are these dwellings here. So these were intended to be apartments, which was provided as the affordable housing provision within the development. So just some floor plans here. So you can see 1 bedroom apartments on the ground floor, and second and third floor. Second floor, you can see it's a 3-storey building in total. So this was sort of quite a significant building on the corner, but it was all to be provided as affordable housing. And the council were happy, the council's housing officer, I should say, was happy that this met a need within the town. So we were happy to accept these as the unit secured, like I say, in the 106 agreement. And the developer has indeed started to build these. So these are some sort of recent site photos to show the development in progress. So what happened was, as the developer was bringing the site forward, as is usually the way, they would approach registered providers that they work with or that operate within the district with a view to finding somebody who would take the affordable units on or take them from, or purchase them, I should say, from the developer. What the developer found when they were approaching the providers were that there was either no interest at all, or that there was particular elements of the development that the RPs weren't happy with and which couldn't be altered within the consented scheme, which meant ultimately that there was no interest that came forward. The developer came to the council, came to the planning officers and the housing officer, and explained what the situation was. They were able to evidence the approaches that they'd made to the registered providers. Our housing officer made his own inquiries with contacts at registered providers to sense check what we were being told, and indeed found that there was no appetite at all for the 6 units that were being offered. So the situation that the council finds itself in is we could either refuse the applicant's request to vary the 106, which would cause the developer a significant problem. They would be building flats, or would have part-built flats, which they weren't able to use as affordable housing because they can't find a registered provider to take them. That would be, I think, from officers' point of view, very unsatisfactory. It would mean a building sitting empty with no use. It would cause the developer significant financial problems and could in fact delay the delivery of other housing within the site. So what we've tried to do is find a way of replacing the on-site provision. So we've negotiated a financial contribution which is £280,000, which will be provided by the developer in lieu of the on-site provision. As we set out in the report, the level of the contribution is based on the cost, which would be between what we would expect a registered provider to have offered the developer and the cost of provision. So we feel it's appropriate. So it's not a question of the developer giving us sufficient money to buy 6 units in place. It's about the developer paying a proportionate amount of money which reflects the cost that they would have incurred in providing the affordable housing had a registered provider taken the units on the site. So in terms of allowing the developers to proceed with the development, build out the site, the council received the financial contribution which we can use towards alternative affordable housing provision within the district. Officers recommend that we do agree to the variation of the Section 106 agreement, and we ask that members approve that this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Neil. And Councillor Munday.
Thank you for the explanation. I understand the reasons for this, but it still feels that House is losing out on the allocation of the affordable houses, or flats rather, and that the financial contribution is for the district. But is there any way that we can ring fence that 280,000 to be for Household itself rather than using it in the wider district?
Yeah, so this is the approach that we consistently take, where we unfortunately have these situations where we have to take a financial contribution in lieu of on-site provision. What we would usually, or what the housing team would usually do, is when the money is received, and it varies as to when we receive the money, but what they would do is they would look for opportunities to use the money for affordable housing provision at the time. So if there was an opportunity to use the money towards provision in Household, they could certainly do that, but it could be that another opportunity presents itself elsewhere within the district, or it could be that we need to use more than one contribution. So from other agreements, we may need to put contributions together. So on all of the other ones that we've done, to the best of my knowledge, we've always specified that the money be spent on affordable housing provision within the district, and then the housing team can look for the best deal and the best benefit for the district in terms of meeting need. So we wouldn't recommend that we restrict the spend purpose so it's only available to spend in Hounslow, because that would make it harder for us to spend, and we could end up getting less value for the money in terms of the number of units or the type of units that we end up securing.
Councillor Ritchie and then Councillor Spray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is a real shame, I think. I remember when we agreed this, I think I actually proposed it at this planning committee. Hounslow really does have a need for affordable homes, and indeed, I think what appealed to us was the fact that this was one-bedroom bed stock as well, which is really, really relevant for residents of Hounslow. Just noting that there is other development taking place on the site of Stones, is there any way that we can change it to reflect that there should be affordable housing provided somewhere else on the site, given that there's been no interest, or was that... okay, thank you much for that. The other question that I was pretty going to ask was, why is there reluctance from a housing provider to take those flats on? Because I would have thought they were absolutely ideal.
Yeah, so unfortunately we're finding, well, sorry, just go back a step, just to stress, this is absolutely, we think the applicant is wanting to provide the affordable housing, so yeah, I think it's important to note that the developer was very keen to try and get this away. It was very much their intention, so this isn't a situation where a developer's trying to renege on something or wriggle out of doing something. Unfortunately, what we're finding at the moment is that the registered providers that operate within the district and indeed nationally are becoming more picky about the types of developments that they will take. They're becoming more selective. A lot of them are only expressing an interest in taking units on much larger sites. So a development of which only provides 6 units, and that's not dismissing the value of 6 units in Hounslow. I absolutely take Councillor Mundy and Councillor Ritchie's point on that. But from an RP's point of view, they're most of them are much more interested if you've got 20, 30 units on a site. So obviously a much bigger development, but they would be getting a much larger number of units within one area. So whilst there are still some registered providers that will take half a dozen units on a site like this, I think the particular issue we had here was it's all flats, which again isn't as attractive to some registered providers. And also within the layout, there's an element of a layout where there's shared facilities between the flats, which will be managed by the registered provider, and some market housing as well. That, from a registered provider's point of view, provides particular issues in terms of how they manage their properties and the pressures they potentially come under from owners of properties adjacent. So because they're becoming more picky, that's one of the things where previously they might have been quite happy to take them, but unfortunately in the current environment they're not. And it's unfortunate, not to criticise Eastlight specifically, but Eastlight certainly have been historically taking developments like this as our main stockholder in the district, and unfortunately they're one of the registered providers who aren't now willing to take these types of units. So it is a growing problem. We are trying to design schemes so they are more attractive to RP, so we're trying to design out these sort of shared elements, so we're trying to design out issues where we can, but I think that the problem where we've got relatively small number of units is a challenge for us to find a registered provider to take them, and there's a few cases now where we've had to take financial contributions.
Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll be very quick. Thank you for letting me to come back on one more point. Is to avoid this happening again in the future, I know you mentioned that you're trying to get it designed out at the right stage. Is there any way we could condition at planning stage that the developer should have engaged with an RP at planning stage as a condition so that we know they're going to be taken over at that point?
Yeah, it would be difficult to do that because the RP's appetite changes. So I'm dealing with a different site at the moment where a year and a half ago, a developer went to RP's, had 6 strong offers, which were all acceptable. They've done the same exercise again at our request. They've got 1 offer which is acceptable, 1 which they're saying they could possibly get by with, and that was it in terms of interest. So that sort of indicates, and that's a larger site, but that sort of indicates to us the level that it's scaling off. So whilst we could ask developers to do that, I think the problem is it wouldn't be binding on the developer or the RP at the time, and if the problem would still likely arise, or could still potentially arise in the future, unfortunately.
Yes, Sir. Councillor Spray, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. Just, I agree with everything that's been said. It is a real shame, but I do take exception to one thing in the report, which is the comment by Halstead Town Council, point 8.1, where they say they objected strongly to the application on the grounds that it is unacceptable that the developer is prepared to ignore the needs of certain parts of the population for affordable housing. Well, I think that's very unfair to the developer. This really isn't their fault. They had, they hoped, an agreement with a registered provider who then pulled out. It appears that they tried very hard to find somebody else, one of the other providers within the district, with no success. And as Neil said, that was confirmed by our housing team, who did their own investigation. So I do think it's really quite unfair to blame the developer for this not happening. I just wanted to make that point, Ricky. Thanks.
Yes, I think that's well made, Councillor Spray. Any other members wish to comment on this application? Okay, so anybody like to move that we approve variation of the section 106? Councillor Holland, Councillor Ritchie seconding that? Okay, members, so it has been moved by Councillor Holland, seconded by Councillor Ritchie, that we agree to the recommendation to vary section 106. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you, members. So that brings us on to our final application this evening. This is item 5E on the agenda. That's application number 23/02893 full. This is Halstead Hall, Braintree Road, Greenstead Green. And we do have two speakers on this application. So the first speaker this evening is Councillor Paul Foster from the Greenstead Green and Halstead Rural Parish Council. If you'd like to come forward and make your statement, Mr. Foster, more 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The Parish Council welcomes the County Highways objection to the proposal. It supports the concerns the Parish Council raised in our formal consultation response about highway safety, efficiency and accessibility to public transport. There's currently poor visibility for drivers turning both left and right from Russell's Road onto Braintree Road, and the additional increase in traffic movements arising from this proposal could increase the risk of an accident. The applicant has relied upon an out-of-date transport statement prepared by another applicant in July 2018, which accompanied a previous application. We would have liked Essex County Council Highways officers to have requested an up-to-date comprehensive transport assessment. The Parish Council also wishes to see the footpath extended along the northern edge of the A131 from the bus stop to the northeast corner of the site, in order that pedestrians crossing the busy A131 can cross the road, not have to cross the road. The Parish Council is pleased to note that despite there being an existing planning permission for 20 residential dwellings on the site, officers have recommended refusal on a number of grounds, including that this proposal would result in overdevelopment and have an adverse impact upon the character and appearance of the local area. Although the site lies on the edge of Halstead, it falls within our parish with its own particular landscape character within a predominantly rural setting. We welcome the comments made by the Council's landscape officer about the poor design, detailed design, lack of architectural variety and diversity in character. This is in line with the recent changes to the National Planning Policy Framework in December last year, which placed a greater weight on developers ensuring outcomes support beauty and placemaking. With the significant pressure that local authorities are under to deliver new homes, laying down a clear marker about the need for high quality design can be challenging. So we are pleased that officers have provided a lot of information in the report about why the design characteristics on this scheme makes for an unattractive street scene and poor placemaking attributes. by following your officer's recommendation in refusing planning permission on grounds of unsympathetic urban design, developers preparing layouts for residential schemes on other sites within the district will hopefully take note and raise their game to ensure they achieve the best possible design within the physical constraints of the particular site and commercial viability. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. The next statement is going to be from Mr. Adam Bell, who is representing the applicant. Thank you, Mr. Bell. 3 minutes again. Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Bell, could you put your microphone on, please?
Sorry. Okay, I'll start again. Good evening, Madam Chair, councillors. I'm Adam Bell, speaking on behalf of the applicant, Bennett Homes. So this site already benefits from full planning permission. This was obtained by the owner of the adjoining care home without consideration to buildability or the functionality of the internal housing layouts. We have therefore reapplied, utilising less quirky house designs that respond to the aspirations of the market whilst retaining the design and appearance that a site of this character deserves. We have had 2 pre-application inquiry meetings with the planning department. We have responded to the design feedback obtained from both meetings and changed the scheme significantly at each stage before submitting this application. We are therefore disappointed that the application has been taken to committee with a recommendation for refusal, largely on design grounds, without us having a chance to amend our proposals in order to address what we believe to be easily resolvable matters of detail. Our architect has already had discussions with the council's design officer, and we think that we are close to producing a scheme that will be acceptable to him. I am surprised that the council is not allowing a more collaborative approach to enable us to work together positively to overcome the issues raised within the context of the current application to save us all time and resources and speed up the delivery of this site, where the principle of development and broad design concept is already agreed. I am therefore asking members to defer a decision on this application and to allow us an extension of time to allow our revised proposals to be consulted on and properly considered. This is something that will have to be done in due course anyway, whether we submit another application, seek to vary the existing planning permission, or even take a refused application to appeal. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. Now move on to the officer presentation, which is going to be given by Carol. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good evening, members. This application is for a proposal to erect 23 residential dwellings, and that's including 6 affordable units. And the location is the land adjacent to Househead Hall along Braintree Road. So this shows you the location plan. The site is about 1.55 hectare in size, and the next aerial photo shows you the wider site context. The red star shows the application site. To the northeast is Househead Hall, which the site used to be part of the wider hinterland. And there's the Green Lodge slightly to the north of Househead Hall. And to the immediate northwest of the site is tree boughs, including some mature trees that are protected by tree preservation orders. And further to the north is Mallett's Hall. So the site is located to the north of the junction of Russell's Road and A131. The site is on the southwest edge of Househead Town and is located outside department boundaries. As mentioned by the applicant earlier, the site itself has extended consent at the moment. A previous consent has been granted for the wider site area, including Househead Hall, Green Lodge, for extension to provide a 25-bed dimension care unit. And this western parcel, which is the subject of the current application site, has as part of the previous consent, has approval to build 20 units. of dwellings, including bungalows and 1.5 stories dwellings. So back to the current proposal. This slide shows you the proposed site layout. As you can see here, the site is here following the similar pattern with an internal ring road, and all the houses will be facing outward onto this ring road. So I'll just show you some of the house type that has been proposed within the current proposal. This slide shows you the largest properties proposed within the scheme. So it refers to plots 3, 4 and 5, which is proposed for 4-bed market units. And these 3 units will be coming with a linked double garage. As you can see here on the ground floor, there's also a study, living room, kitchen, linked to the double garage, and on top of the garage is a large annex. So this slide shows you the elevations of this house type. The next house type I want to show you is the 2 affordable units that are 3-bed units proposed to be wheelchair adaptable. As you can see here on the ground floor, there's one of the including bedroom 3 and toilet, and on 4th floor is proposed to have a master bedroom and another bedroom with a shared bathroom. Officers has concerned that it appears that the floor plans does not meet the standard of the national described space standards. And apart from the master bedroom, the other 2 bedroom appears to be only suitable and have the size able to be a single bedroom. So all in all, the so-called 3-bed affordable units might not be able to fit 5 persons. And this shows you the elevations of the 3-bed affordable properties. The next house type I want to show you here is the smallest house type within the proposal. They are the affordable units, which is only 2-bed units. As you can see here, the house size is significantly smaller than the other market units. And these 2-bed affordable units are the only staggered terrace house type within the proposal. This shows you the proposed tree protection plan of the proposal. As you can see here, quite a significant number of trees will need to be removed or to be pruned to facilitate the development. At the southern corner, there's also a Category A oak tree that the applicant is proposed to be translocated. However, there's no detailed information on how this will be translocated. And within the submitted arboricultural impact assessment, there has been conflicting information about how many trees to be removed. At one part of the report is proposing to remove 17 trees. However, at the detailed appendix of tree works to be done, has been indicated to remove 50 trees, including another 114 trees to be pruned. So this shows you the submitted proposed sketch from the applicant. This shows the view from the north corner of the site. So along this side here is Russell Road. This is the proposed site entrance into the site. And then the existing care home facilities is at the bottom corner here. The applicant has also provided some computer-generated images. So this one shows the view as seen from the site entrance from Russell's Road. So this one in the middle reflects plot 1, and the one on the left refers to plot 2, and the one just behind the tree here refers to plot 28. There's also some examples house type submitted. The image in the middle refers to the largest market properties that I referred to earlier, that with the linked double garage and the annex on top of the garage. The picture on the right-hand side here shows some example of market 3-bed units. However, on the left-hand side, this image, officers are unable to identify which particular house type it relates to because it's slightly different with the submitted floor plans and elevations. The next few slides are going to show you the existing situation of the site. So some site photos here to show you the site at the moment is relatively flat and is vacant. There's quite a lot of mature trees along the site boundaries. This one shows you the site as well from the entrance via the existing care home. The photos here shows you a derelict shed as found on site currently. And the bottom one shows you the existing tree belts along A131 Mount Hill. So we talked about the nearby buildings earlier. So this one on the top here shows Houser Hall, which is the care facilities, and to the left here is the Green Lodge, which has the consent to be extended and to provide a 25-bed dementia care unit. The bottom photo shows you the existing vehicular entrance of Houser Hall via A131. And finally, two more photos to show you. The one on top here shows the corner of the site along A131 and near the junction of Russell Road to the behind the trees there. And the bottom photo shows you the new housing development Bloor Homes housing estate just opposite the site to the south. So in summary, the current proposal is only contains the western parcel of the previous consent, which has consent for 20 bungalows and houses. And because the extension is still extended at the moment, so it remains as a fallback position for the applicant to build out. So when comparing the current proposal to the consented scheme, the major comparison includes the bullet point here. So this current proposal is an intensified version of the consented scheme. It will provide 3 more market dwellings, so the total number of units to be provided will be 23 units. There will be a change in the housing mix. There's also a stronger emphasis for larger housing types, which is not in line with the identified housing need of the district. There will be change in appearance. There will also be increase in size and height. And as I mentioned earlier, there will be also introduction of terrace property, and there will be introduction of double or linked double garages. And visitor parkings are also proposed to be located to the outer ring of the road. So this slide shows you a closer look comparing the previous scheme to the current one. As you can see, the one on the right-hand side is the current proposal. So the visitor parking is now being located to the outer ring. And then in terms of building separations, there's less building separations compared to the consented schemes. The internal ring road is also strengthened to allow easier internal access. So considerations of the current proposal, officers are of the view that the current proposal represents a more generic design. It is of poor quality and poor design and layout, which is more car dominant and will result in unattractive street scene. It also represents poor place making principles. So it represents dilution of the previous consent. In terms of consultation, there's quite a lot of technical objection has been received. That's including highways, and there's a harmful loss of trees has been identified, and the applicant has not provided sufficient mitigation or compensation measures. And as a result, there's also a consequential impact in terms of impacts on protected species. The proposed surface water drainage scheme is also considered unacceptable by the lead local flood authorities. And as a result, a Section 106 agreement has not been secured, and that will result in a lack of planning contributions in terms of mitigating the recreational impacts on designated sites, in terms of affordable housing contribution, and contribution on open space, outdoor sport, equipped play areas, allotment. And planning obligations also include health contribution and education and library facilities. So just an update to members. Following the publication of the committee agenda, the applicant has contacted Essex County Council Highways regarding the need for refugee islands that has been identified in paragraph 7.15.2 in the report. So Highways Authority has reviewed the information provided by the applicant. However, they still consider that additional information is still required, and that including technical drawings and more information about how pedestrian connection can be linked up to a pair of bus stops, and pedestrian visibility, as well as a road safety audit stage 1 report will also be required together with the designer response. So Highways today has confirmed with the council that their objection will still remain. So when we think about the overall planning balance, one of the main considerations is that the council currently is able to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and therefore the presumption required under paragraph 11D of the National Planning Policy Framework is not engaged. Officers consider that the proposal currently contradict with our adopted policy of our local plan. When weighting the overall planning balance, officers consider that there will be adverse harm outweighing the limited benefits identified, and therefore is recommended the planning permission to be refused. So, in response to the applicant's statement earlier requesting for a deferral, officers just want to highlight that officer has been in discussion with the applicant previously and has also clearly identified that fundamental change will be required to address all the technical concerns. And there will be requirement for more technical reports to be conducted in order to resolve all the technical objections. So it is officer wills that a deferral would not be appropriate, as a fundamental change of the scheme will be required. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you for picking up that last point as mentioned by the applicant in their statement. Members, I'll pass it over to you. Councillor Bevis.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you to the officer as well for that quite in-depth presentation, which I found really helpful as well. I mean, my first inclination is to say sort of, you know, here we go again. You know, Neil was sitting over there, Andy, myself, and many others, I'm sure, have walked and considered this road and the amount of development on it on so many levels over so many years. And I think the officers have come to the right conclusion. I think also to defer it would be, you know, the wrong thing to do as well. I still, you know, completely do believe that Russell's Road is just the wrong place totally for the entrance to this site. I mean, it is such a tiny rural road. I don't know whether members use it. I use it a lot, and I still cannot believe we would even consider putting a development from such a tiny rural road. And this has been well rehearsed over many years, and I've met with many developers going back some time, years ago, when this site was first being looked at, and there was so much resistance to that road being used. I also feel that the main road as well, I'm so pleased we've had comments back from county and that more work is going to be done from county, because speeding along that road, it's an accident where, in the fact, accidents have happened. My sister actually was involved in one herself a few years ago, before many of these houses were built. So I really feel that we've come to the right conclusion. I still feel it's overdevelopment. It's in the rural setting, and it just interferes and upsets the long views of this rural setting as well. So I'm keen to listen to what other members have got to say this evening. I would be more than happy to move officers' recommendations, but I'm just going to wait and just see what others say. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Schwer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think the presentation was very good, and I think the facts are laid before us, before the committee tonight, from the officer. And I think all the reasons for the technical explanations and objections have been very good. And I think taking into account all the considerations being put before us, that I, like Councillor Bevis, would recommend officer's recommendation on this, just because of all the explanation of what is right. And I'd like to comment on the Greenstone Green Parish Council about the fact that about the opportunity for beauty and placemaking, and I think this has been again very important to lay down a sort of a line in the sand here, where this is really important, even at this point, to acknowledge what we are trying to achieve here. So, considering all the considerations and what's been said by the Parish Council, I agree with officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think not for the want of having the objection by Essex County Highways, which is a strong enough objection for us to refuse this as a single item. I tend to find myself agreeing with some of the comments from other councillors. Just again, thank you to Carol for the detailed presentation. I think it needed to be, just so that we could make the comparison between the two. The extent permission, which is an extent permission, which I don't think we need to lose sight of. There's already an extent permission on that site, so something could well be brought forward. But also on the point around deferment. Deferment is afforded to us on small issues whereby we seek clarification on minor technical issues that can be brought back in a fairly short period of time. This does not fall into that category where we could defer and wait for some details like that. There is too much details that still needs to be clarified as part of this application. And if it was that straightforward, then why didn't the applicant withdraw the application in the first place and then bring it back at a time whereby it would have stood more of a chance after engagement and technical clarifications from statutory consultees? I too will be siding with officer's recommendation to refuse this application this evening. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Any other members wish to say anything on this application? I think that is a no. So would any members like to move officers' recommendation? Councillor Bevis, you'd like to move officers' recommendation to refuse the application?
Yeah, I would be happy to move officers' recommendations. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
And a seconder? Councillor Schwer will second that. So it's been moved by Councillor Bevis, second by Councillor Schwer, that we refuse this application. All those in favour of refusal? Again, that is unanimous. Thank you, members. So the last item on the agenda is urgent business. We don't have any urgent business, so I will bring this meeting to an end at, I think it's just about 9 o'clock. Thank you very much, members. Thank you, everyone, for attending.